Hey people, welcome to the channel. I hope everyone is having a great week and a little bit under the weather myself, so apologies for that. I want to do something different. This is going to be a video reaction. This is the decline of Christianity in America from a YouTube channel called Breaking Points. By the way, great YouTube channel. They have these, the two sides, like someone a little bit more on the left, a little bit more on the right, and usually the content is quite good, which is rather rare these days. So I started watching it, I liked it a lot, and I thought might as well do a proper reaction video to it. And before you think, oh, this is not for me, I'm not a religious person, or yes, I am, it doesn't matter. One of the things that it's difficult for people to quite understand is, even if you don't have a religious view and you think, oh, I don't think there's a God, okay, that's great on you. You still need to understand how that influences the society you're living in crucial matters. Those values that people have, they do come from somewhere. Oh, but you can have moral values and not be religious. Okay, based on what? That's the point. What kind of moral values that you have? Oh, I'm just a good person. Well, what you consider to be a good person, that those million immigrants that come from a very different part of the world with very different religions and very different values, they may not align. So he thinks he's a great person based on his own moral values. They just happen to be very different from yours. Anyway, let's watch and comment as we go on.
We're joined now by John Daniel Davidson. He's my colleague at The Federalist, where he's a senior editor. But for the purposes of this conversation, he's also the author of a new book, Pagan America. John, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Now, a lot of our viewers, and actually a lot of the country, is frankly not Christian, not practicing Christian in the way that you write about in this book, and definitely probably looks at this and says, what does pagan America mean? And I'm not even just talking about people on the left. What do you mean by pagan America? And what does that mean for people who aren't right now going to church every Sunday and honestly would hear your description of paganism that you're going to give and say, okay, so it means we've separated church and state. Good.
Yeah, right. Okay, so pagan America is an argument that there's really only one alternative to Christianity, and it's not secularism. It's paganism, right? And I don't mean that in a post-Christian era that we're in, as you say, many people in this country, a growing number of people are not practicing Christians, and a growing number don't even identify as Christians. I think in about 20 or 30 years, we'll have Christianity as a self-identified group, as a minority in this country for the first time ever, right?
And they might hear post-Christian America and think, and Ryan, you probably hear that and you think, okay.
I think, okay, post-Christian America is fine. Part of the argument of the book is that America, as we know it and understand it, is only possible with a Christian people. In other words, a people who accept...
Oh, right. The America that you think of, the red, white, and blue America that you probably picture, it's based on those Christian values. Even if you're not Christian, whatever religion you are, if that's what you have in your mind, that's a Christian America. Without that, it's not America anymore. Oh, but we've always been a secular state. Yes. Or no, actually no. But the thing is this, you cannot have one without the other. And that is clearly changing.
Basic normative claims of Christian doctrine, chief among them the doctrine of Imago Dei, that each person is created in the image and likeness of God, and therefore has inherent dignity, from whence we get rights, freedom of speech, religion, consent of the governed, all of the things that we associate with our American system of government and our American way of...
That is increasingly not the case, and I don't want to stop this all the time, but I just have to make this point. That is increasingly not the case, especially in the conservative right circle. Don't kid yourself. It's never been the case for the left. The left does not believe that there's anything sacred, special. They don't believe in the individualism, that every single person is made in the image of God and has a specific dignity. The left does not believe in any of that. It used to be that the conservatives, the right wing, the more Christian traditional value people, believe that. Now, unless you've been living under a rock for the last 10, 15 years, it's increasingly not the case. It's increasingly the case of kill them all, and let God sort them out, or just joke about mass murder, genocide, and just blow them all up. It's increasingly the case that so-called conservatives are detached from what this man is explaining. The idea of no, you don't do that. If you are, and I won't even say, because it's something I've noticed over the years, that Christian values, what kind of Christian exactly are you? I come from a Catholic background. That's the denomination that is the intrinsic part of the culture where I come from. In Argentina, it's not so much. It's been more and more these last few decades, but traditionally it wasn't about. You were not Christian. You call yourself Catholic, and that's the point in which many will try to make. Oh, you see, you're not real Christians. No, it's actually the opposite. Lots of these guys that just call them Christians have no attachment or understanding of what the values that Jesus Christ holds dear are. They just, it becomes this snake charming bullshit thing that does not reflect any of that. And I go back to this thing of life doesn't matter. It doesn't matter anymore. And here is where it becomes a lot more like the pagan idea, the idea of just conquer, dominate, and control without any regard to know that other person is made in the image of God and has a certain dignity that you have to respect. And this is a channel about survival and preparedness. A lot of this involves self-defense, the use of firearms, the idea that yes, it is perfectly right to use that force when there's no other option. When there is no other option, you don't just go happily, no. It's on those extreme cases. And man, I have talked about this over the years so much. Not only have I talked about, I have lived through this over the years, unfortunately, for a long time, just as much as so many people from my country. It is a reality that you're used to, that yes, it may be one day you have to defend yourself and do things that you wish you would not have to do. Again, things you wish you would not have to do, but you don't have a choice. You don't relish, you don't love the idea of massacring people, and especially just because they're different. No, you don't have much of a choice. It's either you or them. That's okay. This sort of thing that you see the so-called conservatives just, have what dreams about massacring. No, that is not a moral standard that aligns with any version of Christianity or Catholicism that I'm familiar with. Let's go back to this.
Of life are products of Christian civilization. They can't exist on their own outside of that context, right? Outside of that context, they eventually devolve into a form of post-Christian neo-paganism. And that's the era that we're emerging into today. As we shed our Christian civilization, we're also going to shed those things that we associate with our American way of life that I just enumerated. And the reason is because there's no basis for them outside of a Christian moral cosmology that posits, what human beings are and what their relationship to God is and what their relationship to one another should be.
So I pride myself in reading all the books before we interview the author, and I just did not have time to get to this one, so I apologize. So I'm coming in totally kind of blank. But why is that the case? Why can't just appreciation for civic virtue and love of country and just general morality?
Great point. This is something that a lot of people, I'm not a Christian, but I have my morals, right? Well, what are those exactly, and based on what?
Like, be enough to stitch together a people.
Well, general morality has to be based on something, a vision of the world, or a vision of what human beings are, right? So pagan morality, and this holds true across vast expanses of time and geography and cultures, is that if you are not part of my group, then it's my moral duty to take what you have or subjugate you for the benefit of me and my people, right? And that's what we see over and over again throughout history, the history of pagan peoples and cultures.
Right. So let me ask about, so we've been a Christian nation for a couple hundred years. Mm-hmm. We have launched more wars than any other nation, maybe in history. Like in the 200 plus years that we've been a country.
We've done some subjugating.
We've done some subjugating. There have been only a few years out of all of those.
Well, maybe that's a clue as of what you really are and are not, right? Maybe that's a clue as of this, this broad idea of, yeah, we have these Christian values. Exactly what do you mean by those? Because I've seen some fucked up people claim to be Christian. That's why I make the distinction. I know what the standards and the values are from a Catholic upbringing. Now, from a Christian upbringing, I've seen such a widespread variety of things from criminals that, yeah, we're evangelical. No, you're not. I mean, maybe yes, you are. You're these evangelical criminals. That is the most popular thing in prison all over the world. Yeah, that's what. But I'm Christian? No. That is definitely not the values that are associated with that.
Those years, even during our isolation, quote unquote, isolationist period while we're enacting a genocide, that we were not at war with other people and subjugating them. So either it's not true that Christianity allows us in a meaningful way to see others as equals and treat them as we would like to be treated, or we are just overriding that as an impulse. Like, well, when is this Christianity going to kick in?
Well, I wouldn't I want to be careful we don't mistake an ideal for history is contingent and we're never going to attain the ideal of like human equality, right? Or a perfect realization of Christian moral ideals. The United States didn't do it. European civilization didn't do it. I don't think anyone's ever going to get it, right? But that doesn't negate the fundamental sort of philosophical and moral claims of Christianity, right? Christianity, as opposed to many other moral and religious systems, does claim an equality between people, and that's where we get things like human rights, the basis for human rights and human dignity.
So why can't you take it out? So like in a post-Christian America, why can't you say we like the ideas that came from Christianity?
Golden rule's golden.
We're taking the Christ out of it, and like we just
Christless Christianity.
Right.
And
we're taking the Christ out of Christianity. Isn't that something so 2024? I love that. I love that. She actually said it. Let's take the Christ out of Christianity. That's how you end up with these Christians. That's exactly what I was talking about. Thank you so much, lady. Yeah, that's what so many people have done over the years. They've taken the Christ out of Christianity. I'm just Christian. Well, really? So what exactly do you stand for? And that's how you have, it says Israel down there. You have how many of these churches are calling for the mass extermination of people simply because of the political alignment that they have with the Israeli government? That is not very Christian. That's not the kind of thing that Jesus would go around talking, yeah, let's bomb, nuke, and exterminate those Gazans because they're pissing off the current administration over in Israel. That is not Christian, but that's what happens when you take Christ out of Christianity and use it as an empty shell, as a disguise to pretend to be virtuous when you're nothing but. Let's take Christ out of Christianity. That's how you end up with. In
other words, or a secular humanism, right? This is the argument that Steven Pinker or Richard Dawkins would make, right? They want the culture without the cult, but you can't have the culture without the cult, because the culture relies on the religion and the religious claims as the source of its vitality, the source of its coherence, right? Why should a people who are post-Christian retain Christian moral virtues, right? Why should I think that all men are created equal when clearly, in many ways, people are not equal? We see.
Oh, it's so good. I sorry for pausing. So I heard Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi. You know that lady? Pelosi? I'm saying it right. Nancy Pelosi. She had something to say very interesting about if all of the United States falls apart, if the Capitol falls and crumbles, and there's nothing left, and there's only one thing left, Nancy Pelosi said, it would be loyalty towards Israel. That would be the only thing that would survive if only one thing survives from the complete destruction of the Capitol. Nancy Pelosi said that. And who is the other one? The Christie. It's both Democrats and Republicans. They say the same thing. If you find yourself aligned with Nancy Pelosi on anything, you're probably on the wrong side. So when you see fucking Ted Cruz basically say the same thing, when Nancy Pelosi and Ted Cruz are basically the same person in something as critical to who you are as a human being, then you have some hard thinking to do. But that's what he's talking about here. That's what he's talking about here when, can we? No, you can't have it, because if not, it's just a lie. It's just an empty shell that you use to pretend to be something you're not.
Inequality all around us. And why shouldn't we adopt a pagan morality that says, inequality? And this is, the ancient Aristotle said this. The ancient pagans, they understood inequality means that some people are naturally slaves and some people are naturally rulers. And if you're poor, that fate has decided that you should be poor, and that's your lot. Christianity, brought a moral revolution to this pagan morality and this pagan cosmology, and posited a radically new way of understanding the world and our relations. And it launched a radical shift in human civilizations that had never before been seen. And so America is one expression of that, right? And we can have different interpretations of American history. European civilization is, of course, where we came from. But we're entering, and this is what the book argues, we're entering this new sort of unprecedented era, a post-Christian era. And my argument is we should not expect the Christian cosmology, the Christian moral virtues that organized the West for all these centuries to remain intact, cut off from the source of their vitality, right? And we should expect something new. And the new thing we should expect is a resurgence of this pagan mentality, the pagan ethos, which is one that's based on force and coercion.
Oh, he's so spot on. It's exactly what we're seeing. And what is more incredible is disguising it as a moral high ground, especially with this stuff in Israel and Gaza. All of these Christians calling for the extermination of people. That's not self-defense. That's not strategic, tactical. No, you're talking about the destruction of the people that have been there. What is it, like 20, 25 years in the Gaza Strip in the Palestine? Not only what you've been seeing for months now, but 30, 40,000, mostly women and children, being bombed with. This is the United States doing it through Israel. And then you can argue, well, it's actually Israel controls Washington, or Israel does what Washington wants to do and do the dirty work, whatever it is it's our base in the Middle East. So whatever you want to excuse that. I'm talking specifically as of what's happening right now, right? And you see all of the apparatus, you see all of the media, mainstream media, you see the conflict between the commies, the left-wing students, raising the call for ceasefire, and at the same time, the mainstream media that wants to take what is useful from the left for their own interests, all of us starting to find themselves in conflict. How can we navigate? How can we have it both ways? We want to be with the left-wing commies for what's convenient, but at the same time, when they're talking about standing for Palestinians or whatever it is, we cannot have that. We are the Nancy Pelosi's. We are the ones that, we pretend to have a high moral value in terms of, slaughtering people, and make no mistake, that's exactly what's happening. the Che Guevara fools may be complete idiots in so many things, but as they say, like even a broken clock is right a couple times a day. That's the same thing. You are looking at targeting of hospitals. There was an IDF soldier laughing about blowing up the last university, the last school, and I think it was the last university that were blowing up, laughing about how they will not have any more education from that point onward. They bombed every single school and university that was there, and the targeting of doctors or medical personnel. It's inexcusable, and yet they will try to make a case for it, and you will see so many self-claimed conservatives and right-wingers that will go like, yeah, we're perfectly fine with that. Why? Well, I don't want to think much about it. I just have to be okay with it because Ted Cruz said it, or Nancy Pelosi, or what is it? The Sandy Cortez was once in favor, and now it is so interesting to see all of these politicians, both on Democrat and Republican sides, trying to, how can I divide myself and make myself okay with these opposing views that are simply incompatible one with the other. You're either for or against what's happening, right? There's not much of, we can, and yet that's what you're seeing. But this idea of the pagan politics, it's not, I'm just talking about this because it says the decline of Christianity in America. That's the name of the video, which I suggest you watch and not my longer version. But it's happening all over the world. If you think as of what's happening in Europe as well, same thing. It's really something. Anyway, let's keep on watching.
I'm still trying to figure out, like I was saying earlier, when does the Christianity kick in? Like if the country's founded on these Christian ideals, and the country had Christians supporting slavery, Christians supporting the ethnic cleansing of Native Americans, Christians supporting the Spanish-American War, the
these were departures.
Philippines.
I think these are departures from Christianity.
Absolutely. Okay, let's.
I mean, these are departures from the claims of Christianity, right?
It's sort of like true communism has never been tried.
Well,
people mock that idea when actual communists will say,
when's
"Look,
the communism going to kick in?"
Yeah, when's the communism? Look, you say, "Well, the Soviet Union wasn't great, Cuba wasn't great." Well, then that wasn't real communism. But Christianity.
I hate doing this, but I have to. One of the things that kind of bugs me is this idea of the conquistadors that came over and enslaved and were brutal. The typical xenophobia of those Spanish animals that were swinging their swords in the name of Christianity or Catholicism, right? First of all, keep in mind that one thing that happens 500 years ago, you cannot adjust it to your current fucked up standards that even we don't understand in our current age of 2024. Those men landed in a completely different new world, and what they saw was people that they could, of course, easily dominate. Maybe in many ways it was people that they saw as inferior, as having less technological achievements, people that didn't even use steel, didn't even use iron, they didn't even have steel. So people that were a very different. I was reading an explorer, a British explorer, that when he found natives in Africa, he was making the argument for, I see that there is intelligence in their eyes. The man was describing them in what in current terms would be, oh, that is so racist. Yeah, well, but you have to put yourself in the position of someone that finds a completely new world with people that are absolutely, completely different from you, right? Today, it's easy to say, but put yourself in the shoes of those guys, and even more so to the case. Put yourself in the shoes of a Spanish conquistador that sees that there's an entire temple in which people are being sacrificed basically daily. They chop off the hearts and heads of people all the time to their religion. What exactly did you expect them to do?
I'm saying
communism only had like a 200-year run. Christianity has had 2,000 years.
Right, and well, I mean, I don't know about you, but I think that Christianity has produced the greatest civilization the world's ever seen, right?
Which one's that?
The one that we're sitting in right now, right?
But certainly a fairer and juster world than we've seen before.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Right. I mean, consider something like, the Roman Empire.
I have to do it. But which one is it? The one you're in right now, my dear commie friend here. These guys seem to ignore that the Western world, what you consider to be the American culture, which basically it's a derivative of what you have from the Western European culture that is purely based on Christianity. All of those values that got started in the United States, that's where it comes from. So when you see the Western world as you see it right now, that's what this man obviously does not understand that he's in. You're in it right now, pal. The greatest, most advanced civilization the world has ever seen, which is based on Christianity. That's what you are in. And that's what people from Africa and from Asia want to go towards. We're not going the other way around. You're not running illegally into Africa or Afghanistan. It's actually the other way around. And there's a good reason for that.
Empire, right? We have a tendency, I guess, since the Enlightenment to sort of romanticize the pagan past and the Roman world and the Greek world. Those are slave societies. Most people in the Roman Empire were slaves. Sure. They didn't have anything like rights, right? If you were a Roman citizen or a Roman aristocrat, you could do whatever you wanted to people who were in a lower station than you. You could rape them, you could murder them.
Yeah, I think there were far more rights than people assume, even for slaves. He's not entirely correct. Yes, you were still a slave. There's no two ways around that. But he's not right about, you could do absolutely, no. They did have a number of rights. You did not enjoy the benefits of being a citizen. A citizen was more, let's put it the other way, so for Roman times, and that's a pretty broad, but basically it would be like in Starship Troopers, right? The rights of the citizen that actually had a voice. Well, that was the citizen versus the slave, the average person that did not enjoy those full rights as a citizen. It is true though that it's a slave society.
You could discard them, and it wasn't seen.
Do a little bit more research into that, but I'm pretty sure that even you had to you could not abuse your slaves, and you actually had some kind of legal bounding of you had to provide for them, right? You had to provide food, shelter, and it's not as simple as, yeah, it's a slave, so you can just go and do whatever you want with it. And I'm sure it happened all the time, especially in a society where the idea of abuse and the way in which they saw sexuality was very different from what you see now. But it's not entirely like that. But yeah, still.
So far from not being any kind of moral censure, it was like a mark of your rank that you were able to do this. This is true all through pagan societies, as I said, across time and cultures.
Well, what about the Ottoman Empire? What about a lot of Chinese empire, like throughout Chinese history? Like you had people who had probably far more rights than they had.
Slave societies too.
And abolished slavery later, actually, in most of the Ottoman areas than were in the West. And what's interesting about that, I think, actually, is one of the grossest Christian arguments in favor of slavery in the United States was these are not people. And what's interesting about that is because as soon as you acknowledge these are human beings and you're a Christian, you have to treat them equally as human beings.
Right, which was the abolitionist argument, right?
Well, I was going to say, if you could talk, because that's in the book, about how Christians get blamed for perpetrating slavery. I think rightfully there was a Christian argument that was made in favor of slavery. It's a Christian argument that's made in front of awful imperialism and, to your point, ethnic cleansing. But if you go to, if you talk about what happened when Columbus arrived, it was Bartolome de las Casas that was saying, this is awful from a Christian perspective.
Yeah, so the debate's over,
And these things take time. As she said, there was a time in which they were not even considered people. These savages that dress in different ways and look different, they were not. And you could say, and yes, some people saw it more clearly than others, but it actually takes, it's understandable that it takes a certain amount of time before you reach the point of, no, these are people, they just happen to be different. They do have the same rights based on my religious moral values. I just cannot keep on doing the thing that I'm doing simply because it's economically convenient. You have to choose one or the other.
What should the proper disposition of Christian Europeans be toward the indigenous peoples of the Americas? That was a debate that was initiated by Catholic monks and scholars in Spain, right? Who had these
the
debates.
indigenous had a view on it too.
No, I'm saying from the European perspective of what should our disposition be toward these peoples in the New World, and there was a debate about their humanity, about what responsibilities the Catholic Church and the Crown had to these people. It was the kind of debate, the fact that they were having a debate about this at all, I would say, is a product of Christian civilization. It's not the kind of thing that would have been debated in a pagan society.
Yeah, or in other religions where that is not a debate. You don't even talk. No, they're not us. They don't share our religion. They don't have our same religion. They are slaves. Period. We're not talking about it. Here, you had to make the logical, you had to go through the path of, are they actually thinking people? And when you reach the conclusion that they are, then there's a decision to be made. That is not something that was debated in the rest of the world.
At all. It would have been absolutely just subjugate these people.
The debates in the Ottoman Empire, the debates in China, debates in Japan, like everybody debates. Like,
no.
I'm talking about a debate about whether or not these people should be just enslaved like animals and treated as such, or should their inherent dignity and humanity be recognized as children of God, and our goal should be to bring them.
Greeks and the Romans all debated that.
He's wrong. Not everyone debates, and if not, check in communist China how they treat debates. He's not right about that.
And on one side of it.
Aristotle debated he disagreed with the practice, how slavery was practiced, but he accepted at the very beginning of the politics, he accepts the premise of natural slavery and natural rulers. His quibble is with the implementation of it, not with the philosophical position that slavery is a natural state for some people. And this was common, but this was never accepted in Christianity in centuries and centuries of Catholic Europe. It was only in a modern context in the 19th century when the antebellum South posited this very unchristian, very pagan argument that slavery was natural, and it was an aberration, it was a departure from how Christianity had been approaching this issue for centuries and centuries. Not only in the New World
against slavery in like 1100.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, the idea of human rights or of peace, that war should be confined and non-combatants should be protected. These were things that medieval Catholic Europe came up with.
That's true, but one reason for that is that these Christians were doing more war than anybody else in history.
Than who? Than Genghis Khan?
Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan is the Genghis Khan's the.
The guy on the left, Christians doing more war. No. And yeah, Genghis Khan, you're talking about complete barbarism being the norm, and Christians doing what? And yes, you do have some countries and some empires that had practices that you can criticize quite a bit, to say the least, but it's nothing compared to what you see from the Mongol horde that would just pillage and destroy everything, right? All of these pagan or communist China, what you saw in the massacre against their very own people, millions of people slaughtered in this century. I mean, it's not, you're not talking about 500 years ago. You're talking about things. These are the results of these pagan governments and these pagan societies that have no moral value of any kind.
Exception, more war than North Americans, South Americans, Chinese, Africans.
More war than the Aztecs. I don't know. More war than more war than the Egyptians, the Comanche.
He's just wrong. He thinks that Christians are the ones that do the most war, and it's not the case. And I would even be making an argument for what you're seeing in terms of the U.S. politics, the U.S. Foreign policy, especially in these last few decades, is precisely what happens when you detach from those true Christian values.
Yeah, look around the world. Like, look at the biggest wars, and the U.S. and Europe.
You're talking about modern, like World War I and World War II.
Yeah, but
if you're talking about, right?
Yeah, but if you look at how far they went.
Well, World War II was a pagan war, right? I mean, Nazi Germany was a post-Christian society.
There you go.
The Soviet Union was a post-Christian society. These were.
Nietzsche's primary argument against Christianity was that it was, in some ways, too.
I think Nazis were pagan.
Equated people. I think Nazis were pagan.
Yeah, Nazis were absolutely pagan. So Nazis were honest enough.
This guy is not informed at all. He just hates Christianity.
Enough, like the Marquis de Sade, right? To say, if we're going to reject Christianity, then the Christian morality has got to go. There's no basis to treat people as though they have inherent dignity and worth. Let's just liquidate all these people.
But they tried to keep the trappings. They liked some of the trappings of Christianity, but they took Christ, quite literally took Christ out of the Christianity.
And didn't they go after the communists as godless?
The Nazis were their god was sort of the pagan Volk, right? The very clearly hearkening back to a pre-Christian, even in their aesthetics, right? It
was Nordic.
You know, there's no sense in which the Nazis were a manifestation of Christian cosmology, right? This was very clearly post-Christian, and so when I say post-Christian, and the reason I say the Nazis were at least honest about it is that if you get rid of the Christian claims, you eventually have to get rid of the Christian morality too. So I mentioned the Marquis de Sade. During the Enlightenment, there was this rejection, overt rejection of Christianity, and specifically attacks against the Catholic Church. Marquis de Sade said, well, not only should we attack Christianity, but we should sweep away Christian morality as well. There's no reason why the strong should, scrape and bow before the weak. That's against nature, right?
That's what Nietzsche said too.
Yeah, that's what Marquis de Sade. That's what Nietzsche said. That's what the Nazis said, right? And that is what pagan society. That's the principle on which pagan societies had always been organized. And what I'm saying is that Christian civilization was organized on different principles, never fully realized, right? Ideals that we are always moving toward, never quite.
But that's why they are ideals. That's why precisely they are. It's the perfect, the perfectly moral person does not exist. You're flawed. You sin. You're not religiously perfect either, but you strive towards that, and that is a lot better than not having any kind of moral compass.
Going to achieve, because this is the world and we're fallen, people are what they are, but the ideal and the claim, the ontological claim about what people are, was fundamentally different than what pagans posited.
Last word, Ryan?
No, go ahead and read this book, but I don't know. I think if the U.S. is held up as the example, as the most Christian nation,
Dude, it is not by a long shot, and it hasn't been for a long time. No.
It doesn't bode well for linking nationalism and Christianity, just based on our behavior over the last 200 years.
I was going to say what's somewhat interesting about this conversation is that all three of us share very, very similar foreign policy at the moment. So I
don't know what your guys' foreign policy is.
He's a full Leninist. But no, I mean, we pretty much agree on what's happening right now. All that is to say, I actually think this was very helpful to have a conversation from the right. We do a lot on the left. And
we do.
I think it's great to have one from the right. So
well, I appreciate y'all having me on. Read the book, and then we'll come back and talk about it some more.
And then we'll do a fist fight.
There we go.
It'll be see who can triumph in a contest of strength.
We're
not pagans.
Not Christian of it.
Well, if you leave me out of it, it would be kind of Christian. Keep the women, the vulnerable, out of the fist fight. All right, John Daniel Davidson, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
We're not pagans. I like that. No, man. There's no way in which especially the idea of blaming U.S. foreign policy on, it's because Christianity is evil. No, it's actually the opposite. And you have people like Ron Paul. I'm pretty sure Ron Paul is pretty religious type of guy, and he would say that non-interventionism is the way to go. That's the morally right thing to do, is not not place dictators in different parts of the world depending on what's convenient for you at one time or the other, only to then fight against the dictator you put there in the first place. And well, you know how this goes. That's going forward. That's another hour conversation. But anyway, I like this. I think it's quite good. And in general, nothing is perfect. Let's get over that. But the Breaking Points channel in general, it has interesting content. That's going to be all for now. See you next time, guys. Take care.